Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberger channel, the show where we explore interesting and peculiar albums and, we find stuff that's worth having a bit of a chat about, So in today's episode, we're going to the wonderful country of Ireland, where none other than yours truly was born many, many years ago now. And what we have here is, a wonderful, beautiful, improvisational, modern classical album, the truly gorgeous She Came Through the Windows to Stand by the Door by Natalia Beylis Eimear Reidy. So yeah, this is going to be a lovely, meditative, droning album, of course. Truly wonderful stuff. But of course, let's ask the question, who are Natalia Beylis Eimear Reidy? So Natalia Beylis is an experimental musician and composer currently residing in County Leitrim, the least populated county in Ireland. And originally born in Kiev, Ukraine, Beylis has moved around a lot, eventually ending up in Ireland, of course. And across her career, Beylis has been involved in a number of experimental releases, pushing out records for 40 Evil Fruit, Chocolate Monk, and even the Nod Run Tesla tapes, as well as working with Nod's own Paddy Shine, of course. And Eimear Reidy, on the other hand, is a cellist based in Cork, Ireland, and has performed with a wide number of orchestras across most of Europe. And she's recorded, a number of different records, and She Came Through the Window to Stand by the Door is the second collaboration on Nyahh records with Natalia Beylis. So, a little brief overview of the two artists in question, but let's dive into the album, shall we? So, She Came Through the Window to Stand by the Door, a collaborative record from both musicians that was released in March of 2023. Featuring Eimear Reidy performing cello and Natalia Beylis performing the organ. But this isn't just any organ. No, the organ in question is a William Telford organ located in St. George's Church, Carrick On Shannon, Leitrim in Ireland. And where this is where the entire album itself was recorded as well. So, built in 1846, as it says on the Bandcamp actually, this is reputed to have been the second oldest organ in all of Ireland. And so what we have here, it's a beautiful suite of improvised music performed on both the cello and the organ, which both just drone, it intertwines together across very lengthy runtimes to create these ever-moving musical experiences that transcend a range of emotions as it just further progresses. It's incredibly beautiful, and the sheer sounds that these instruments themselves are creating, they're just amazing to listen to. Even when the musicians abstractly go into these, rather intimidating and terrifying sections of the actual performances themselves, but hey, it's just incredibly interesting stuff though. So, She Came Through the Window to Stand by the Door, a vinyl-only release from the two musicians, released on the Irish record label Nyahh Records. And it features two compositions and a third bonus track on the digital version, of course. And so, the album opens up with side A, Pour Upon the Sky, a beautiful and somewhat foreboding track that sees Beylis and Reidy playing within and without the traditional form. And so a little bit of background information as explained on the Bandcamp. It'll be worth reading what's written there for you, just as it helps add a bit of context for us in terms of understanding this album. So, in 18th century music, the cello and organ performed a role as continuo players. Traditionally, the cello and organ are both intertwined and interdependent, playing the bass line and harmonies together and providing a foundation for the rest of the ensemble while soloists come in and out. And so, what we have here on this album is a record where that traditional foundation and format seen, in 18th century music, is one of the sole factors for the performance itself, giving both the musicians the space and time to let those individual instruments truly speak for themselves, as well as supporting each other through the musical movements as well. It becomes this wonderful free-form expression of the very characteristics of the instruments, the interplay between the two of them, how they can support and encourage each other, as well as how they can break away from the conventional norm of such and start becoming the soloists of the very movements themselves. Which is interesting because, going back to 18th century music, they weren't seen as the soloists, but more just the backing things, and it's truly beautiful. But just to go back to we Pour Upon the Sky, though, it opens up with this wonderfully emotive cello performance from Reidy, establishing the scene in such a melancholy fashion, before the organ just becomes a rumbling drone, underscoring the very track, pushing the cello itself further and further as it all progresses. And what's wonderful is how incredibly slowly the organ comes into view, though, becoming much more of a focal point as the cello starts performing abstractions, I would call them. They're sliding around the strings and creating these very esoteric sounds. And then it becomes, very peculiar about 9 minutes in, when the organ builds into this tumultuously terrifying performance while the cello bends and twists around it all in such an absurd fashion. And then it all just fades away to give the cello room to just perform again and bring the emotion back in, if that makes sense. I have to say, listening to it, there's such a wonderful sense of interplay between the instruments, what the cello's doing, what the organ's doing, as well as when they both get room to become the soloists and stand out on their own merits as well. It creates this wonderful listening experience, and as well, you just get these wonderful, phenomenal tones that you can hear when these instruments are just being played so precisely. I love how this thing just sounds. We'll get into that a bit. So, moving on. We end up on side B of the record with the track Whistling Dust, which opens up with a slow, rumbling drone as the very organ itself just creaks into life, as the cello starts to accompany it, gradually and steadily at first. So this one, I would say that this track, it starts to explore different notions and ideas within that very same framework of what was established on the first track. The interplay falling in and out between the two instruments, it still remains a core focal feature of this track, but everything feels a lot more droney and soundscapey on this one, if that makes any sense, of course. And it feels like there's a little bit more experimentation being explored on the organ itself, which starts to feel like this living, breathing entity as the track just further progresses itself. And it slowly does just let these drones patiently build and build in such a patient manner, all while the cello just dances in and around the scene, flipping from dark, undulating bass tones to esoteric, stretched notes that wrap around the organ's tones. I find this track probably to be a bit more enjoyable of the two performances offered on it, as it really just sounds like an expression of the instruments themselves, slowly filling up the space and time with louder and louder instrumentals that genuinely become very, cosmic and wonderful. And so before we finalise this review, this album does offer us one more track on the digital download, of course, the roughly 7-minute Encircled in Moss. And this sees the organ's many keys being really utilised as the cello continues that wonderful dance around the instrument. And you've got some, as this one plays out, you get some incredibly bittersweet notes actually being pulled from the cello, all while the organ continues its loud rumbling drones in the background. It's a lovely additional recording that feels like a further showcasing of just exactly what was going on when this album was recorded, if that makes sense, and just a nice little addition to the whole package being offered here. And so with that, we've essentially covered She Came Through the Window to Stand by the Door by both Natalia Beylis and Eimear Reidy. It's a truly wonderful collaborative album that showcases the powerful performances that one can pull out of what was generally seen as supportive instrument, at least in the 18th century. And this album seems to flip around between these esoteric abstractions to rumbling drones that just so beautifully become so hypnotizing and just an entrancing album experience in its own right. It just all pushes forward with this really patient momentum at times, and I think it's a wonderful album experience, and I'm really glad to have come across this one, which was somewhat coincidental. I'll explain it here actually. The reason I was able to come across this album was actually from a Twitter post from the person who did the mastering for this album, the one and only Stephen Matteo, whose double album A Static Place Remain we covered in one of the very first episodes of Weird Music on the show. And Matteo has been involved in so many wonderful projects, and his specific style of mastering really brings such clear and concise sounds and just clarity to what is being heard, which I'm really grateful for on a recording like this, because the instruments themselves are just now sound so beautiful and wonderful to listen to. Especially when you got nice headphones, arguably, let's be honest, it really just makes it sound so lovely. And I'm grateful actually as well, because I probably wouldn't have come across this album or the artists themselves had it not been for that post by Stephen Matthews. So a huge thank you there for posting that, because this was a wonderfully immersive album experience that I just found truly delightful to just get lost within. And so, with that, I believe we've come to the end of today's episode of Weird Music then. I'm kind of surprised actually that this ended up being one of the first albums from Ireland I've ever talked about on the show, but you know what, it was bound to happen eventually though. It was one of those things where I didn't realise that was happening until I went down to write the very script though, so I just thought it was worth mentioning because it's kind of funny. But regardless though, this is such a truly beautiful and at times somewhat foreboding album experience though, but there's something just so patient about it all though, about the music itself, which just slowly pulls itself together in a rather abstract fashion, just to create this wonderful listening experience that is truly immersive. And I'll definitely be keeping an eye on both Natalia Beylis and Eimear Reidy in future, as the two are no doubt incredible musicians though. And as such, if you have enjoyed this video and you want to find out a little bit more, then you can find a link to She Came Through the Window to Stand by the Door in the description below, as well as links to both Natalia Beylis and Eimear Reidy's own Bandcamp pages. And so with that, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best, hope you take care, and bye bye for now. Bye bye!